Okay, people. So, after talk about the importance of life and, completely unrelated to anything we've been talking about today.
Sorry,
Yes, we're very close to being out of time, in fact. So, I had initially planned to do this talk at the end of the series of the history, the seerah, of the companions, right at the end when they conquered Persia, because I think there was a lot of questions that people might have had that we didn't get time to address in terms of why did the Sahaba even fight? Why did the Muslims even decide from day one to go out and bring the army to the Persians and fight them for the sake of Allah? Why didn't they just say, oh, we'll just we don't have to attack them. We can just spread Islam there, or we can just isn't the point of the deen just to spread Islam rather than to take over and conquer using armies? So I think there are a few questions that people would have had that deserve to be answered. And this goes generally into one of the main criticisms, if you watch TV, Fox News, anything. One of the main criticisms people have of Islam, of Muslims, is that the Muslims they were just bloodthirsty, and they just went around killing everyone and forcing them to convert to Islam, and that's how there's 1.5 billion people in the world today who are Muslim. And so I think I want to go through a few ayats of Quran that came down, talking about this issue of fighting in the sake of Allah, and when and where is it okay to have an army and go and fight people. So, the first thing I want to talk about is that kufr and oppression go hand in hand. So, people who disbelieved in the Prophet ﷺ, it wasn't just oh you can just preach your religion, it's okay, we'll just stand here, we'll do our thing. No, the people realized, especially Quraysh, they realized very early on that the message of Islam was powerful. The message of Islam hit the heart of people, and it was a transformative message that changed people's life, so that people's lifestyle changed. And because of that, the people who are used to being in power and who are used to having influence over people, they start losing their influence. Because if you're the president of a multi-billion-dollar wine industry or beer industry, alcohol industry, it doesn't help that all the people are becoming Muslim and nobody's drinking alcohol anymore. So you start losing control. And it doesn't help that if you used to be the tribe leader, and just because your great grandfather was the great whatever guy who killed someone at some point in time, so now that person has power, and now people are like, what, actually we don't care that your great grandfather killed people, we care about the truth now, and we're going to follow a person who has the best character, who has the best akhlaq, who has the true message. So the Prophet ﷺ, his message by definition, or just by the nature of the message, made it so that the other people who had power would start to lose power. So because of that, people started to oppress the Muslims. And when the first ayah came down about fighting and allowing the Sahaba to fight, it was in Surah Al-Hajj, it's the ayah before this one, أُذِنَ لِلَّذِينَ يُقَاتَلُونَ بِأَنَّهُمْ ظُلِمُوا. And this is the crux of what I'm going to talk about. People have written books and books on this topic, and I'll try to do it in 5 minutes. So, the main purpose that the Muslims went out, armed themselves, and fought and killed other people is to prevent oppression from happening. If there are people who are oppressing other people, who are torturing and murdering other people and persecuting them, it is the job of the Muslim to go up and rise and fight against those people. And so that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He revealed the first ayah of fighting, it was permission has been granted to people to fight because they have been oppressed. بِأَنَّهُمْ ظُلِمُوا. So oppression is a very important key in terms of why the Sahaba fought, and they fought really to remove oppression from the land, not to convert everyone to Islam. It's very clear in the Quran. You read, لا إكراه في الدين أفأنت تكره الناس حتى يكونوا مؤمنين. You cannot coerce and force people to become Muslim. That just doesn't help. There's no forcing someone to become Muslim in the religion of Islam. The next ayah says, الَّذِينَ أُخْرِجُوا مِنْ دِيَارِهِمْ بِغَيْرِ حَقٍّ إِلَّا أَنْ يَقُولُوا رَبُّنَا اللَّهِ. The people who are oppressed, this is talking about the Sahaba, they were oppressed just because they said we believe in Allah. Because of that, they were oppressed, they were tortured, they were killed. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, look at this part of the ayah, وَلَوْلَا دَفْعُ اللَّهِ النَّاسَ بَعْضَهُمْ بِبَعْضٍ لَهُدِّمَتْ صَوَامِعُ وَبِيَعٌ وَصَلَوَاتٌ وَمَسَاجِدُ يُذْكَرُ فِيهَا اسْمُ اللَّهِ كَثِيرًا. That one of the reasons that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, were it not for the fact that Allah protects people, some by means of others, was it not meaning, was it not for the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made fighting obligatory on you to protect other people? And why do you have to protect other people? So that monasteries, churches, synagogues, and temples, and mosques in which the name of Allah is mentioned, they should be protected. This is 1400 years ago, before this idea of freedom of religion and sanctity of religion and protection of people's right to worship what they want to worship. Before all of that came, the Quran was saying that the Muslims have to fight to make sure that churches don't get burned down, to make sure that Jewish synagogues are protected from other people, or any temple, any place of worship in which the name of Allah is mentioned, it has to be protected. And that's why the Muslims were told, you have to, now that you're a big enough, large enough group of people, you have to stand up and you have to fight people if they are doing things that are causing harm to other people's if they're causing harm to other people and preventing them from following their religion. So that's one thing. And the next ayah that also supports this, وَمَا لَكُمْ لَا تُقَاتِلُونَ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. Why is it that you don't go out and fight in the path of Allah while there are people in the lands of kufr, and there are people in the lands out there, والمستضعفين من الرجال والنساء والولدان الذين يقولون ربنا أخرجنا من هذه القرية الظالم أهلها. There are people, weak people, women and children who are living in other lands, who are being oppressed, and they're making dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala every day. Oh Allah, lift this oppression from us and give us a way out, and so that we can practice our religion, so we can accept the truth. This is why the Sahaba fought, because there's people who are being oppressed and who are being killed and persecuted in other parts of the world that are not being allowed to practice Islam, and so the Sahaba fought so that they have a right to worship Allah. So the Sahaba fought so that, just like in the previous ayah, so that other people who want to be Christians while they're living under, Hinduism, for example, they have a right to be Christian wherever they are. Islam guarantees, the fact that people have a right to practice their religion. So these are the two main things of why the Sahaba fought. And going into a few ayats in the Quran, oh God, there's like this weird technical stuff going on. So ayats in the Quran, when they talk about fighting, you notice it's always in context of retaliation. وَقَاتِلُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. Fight in the path of Allah, الَّذِينَ يُقَاتِلُونَكُمْ. Fight in the path of Allah, those people who fight you. So don't just go around killing everyone. There's just no ayah that says just go around killing people. Fight those people who are fighting you, وَلَا تَعْتَدُوا, and don't go overboard. If people commit an oppression and you fight against their oppression, don't go overboard. There's like the concept people have nowadays where one Muslim does one bad thing and now they want to put all the Muslims in the concentration camps, like what's happening in Myanmar, for example, the Burma, and the talk that we had about that. Maybe whatever some people did, or was it just some propaganda, one person did something wrong and now you want to go and kill and fight every people from that group. This is not the Islamic approach. This is not the Quranic approach. وَلَا تَعْتَدُوا, don't go overboard. إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُحِبُّ الْمُعْتَدِينَ. Allah does not love those people who go overboard. And وَقَاتِلُوا الْمُشْرِكِينَ كَافَةً كَمَا يُقَاتِلُونَكُمْ كَافَةً. And if they're fighting all of you all together, then you fight all of them all together. Don't just fight people who are not fighting you. And there's other ayat that support that as well. لَا يَنْهَاكُمُ اللَّهُ عَنِ الَّذِينَ لَمْ يُقَاتِلُوكُمْ فِي الدِّينِ وَلَمْ يُخْرِجُوكُمْ مِنْ دِيَارِكُمْ أَنْ تَبَرُّوهُمْ وَتُقْسِطُوا إِلَيْهِمْ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says He loves the people who, if they aren't killing you and they aren't torturing you, you behave nicely and justly and very kindly towards them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves that. That's in a different surah. So basically, I'm already over time. So I want you to think of an example nowadays, for example, would be something like North Korea. So North Korea, as you know, is a very, very oppressive government. People don't even have internet. People have no access to information. If you said, for example, I want to go to North Korea and tell people about Islam, well, good luck. You can barely even go to North Korea. So you want to go to North Korea, you want to tell people about Islam, you want to spread the truth. And you don't want to fight, you don't want to cause anything, you don't want to do anything. But you won't be allowed to do that. But at the same time, there are people in North Korea, just like the ayah said before, there are people in North Korea, there are going to be men, women, and children who are being, persecuted and tortured and having their family members, being taken away from them and killed and raped and all this kind of stuff happening. And there are people there who are making dua to Allah, saying, oh Allah, free us from this oppression. And so if the Sahaba were here today, they wouldn't be coming here and fighting Switzerland, for example. Muslims are practicing Islam in Switzerland easy. Nobody's giving them a hard time. For the most part, at least. People can go, they can pray, they can pay zakat, they can do this. They're allowed to travel for Hajj, everything. If the Sahaba were alive today, the closest hypothetical example that I can think of is that they would say, the group of Sahaba, if they had their state, they have their army, they say, North Korea, you will allow people, to hear the message of Islam, or at the very least, stop doing this oppression. If not, we're going to attack, because, we have a responsibility in the sight of Allah that people are being oppressed and killed, and you didn't do anything because of it. And so the Sahaba would have, from my understanding, in my hypothetical situation, I feel that the Sahaba would have, if they had an army, they would be attacking North Korea, and it wouldn't just be attacking any other nation just because, they're not Muslim. This is not this is not the approach that the Sahaba took. So why did the Sahaba fight the Persians anyway? So many of you, it feels like a long time ago that we talked about the seerah. But, the Persian king, he insulted the Prophet. He sent people, he sent the ambassador to said, bring the Prophet to me, and doing all this insulting things, which are, nowadays you would consider that, like a international diplomacy disaster, and something that causes war if you insult the leader of another nation, and doing acts of provoking war. So that's why the Sahaba went and they fought the Persians and they fought the Romans. Not just because they were not Muslim and they were just living by themselves normally, or like their next door neighbor is just living peacefully as a non-Muslim. That's not why they fought. They didn't fight just people who were living there by themselves. They fought people who were actively fighting against them, and that's one of the really important things to realize. The last thing that I'll end off with is this concept of freedom of religion. Freedom of religion didn't exist for thousands of years. At the time of the Sahaba, the ruler decided, if the ruler was Christian, everyone was Christian. And it even happened to a point where in the Middle Ages, the ruler one day, he'd be Catholic and he'd be killed. And the next day a Protestant ruler would come, and then he would say, okay, from now on everyone's Protestant. So everyone just, okay, people wake up, okay, I guess we're Protestant today. I guess we believe different things now. So that's how religion used to work. So Islam came to liberate people, so that وَيَكُونَ الدِّينُ كُلُّهُ لِلَّهِ, so that religion can become something that people choose for themselves, and it's something that's solely for the sake of Allah, and it's not something that you do for just to follow a particular leader or some other authority that's over you. So I know it's bruised through a lot of that, and had to cut a lot of that short, but can we take some questions?
Yeah, I think we can get 15 more minutes to questions.
All right. Questions? Yes. Once again, yes. Muslim leaders have been awesome, and they've also been horrible in the past. So we don't decide how good Islam is based on what Muslim leaders did in the past. There's Muslim leaders like Umar bin Khattab and like the four Khulafa, excellent people. And then you have Muslim leaders, horrible people. So, our deen depends on what the Prophet taught us and what the Sahaba did.
And actually, we would love to have also if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills, we go through the history of Muslim Ummah where there are periods of weaknesses, because we are going to learn from the periods of weaknesses the same way we learn from periods of strength. Because maybe now we have a period of weaknesses, so we learn why they were weak at that time. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Another example of before freedom of religion was allowed, like in the 1600s, sort of in Europe, when they would send people during the age of exploration in 1400s to 1600s, they would send people over to either change religion, and how they would do that, they would just send people like Hernan Cortez, and they would just go over and they would conquer areas, destroy all their religious things.
Excellent.
Teach them.
Very good point.
And then pretty soon they would overcome them, and then they would just destroy everything and build over it.
Absolutely. So Christians have done horrible things. I don't know how they try to justify their history, but that doesn't mean all Christians did horrible things. Many Christians did awesome things too. One thing that I had at the end of this slide was the largest Muslim country in the world. Does anybody know what the largest Muslim country in the world is right now? Yes. Malaysia or Indonesia? Which one is it?
Which one?
I think Malaysia.
What do you
Indonesia.
Indonesia is the largest Muslim country in the world today. Not Arab, and guess what? No army ever went to Indonesia. Malaysia or Indonesia, it was just traders who came, and people were like, oh, what are you guys? Why are you so nice? And why are you like telling us, oh, this chair, I'm selling it to you, but it has this problem. Oh, because actually there's a hadith about it. That's why we have to tell you if there's a defect in the product. They're like, oh, really? What's this hadith you talk about? So then that's how Islam spread to Malaysia and Indonesia. No army ever went there. People just saw how awesome these people were. They followed the Sunnah, and people were like, yeah, we want to be Muslim. So now, largest Muslim country. Any other questions? Questions. I know a lot of you probably have a lot of other questions, and other questions might come up later as well. So inshallah, Sheikh's always a good resource to go to. I'll always be around.
Similar to Indonesia and Malaysia, Maldives Islands, for example, okay? Do you know that Maldives Island is a Muslim country? You hear about it because it's a top #1 destination for tourism, but it's a Muslim country. And if you look at the map, where is this island? It's literally in the middle of nowhere. So was there a Muslim army who went there? No. There was a Muslim sailor whose ship got shipwrecked, and then he swam to the island and just lived there, and then the whole island becomes a Muslim because of one person. Was this person carrying a sword? Was carrying weapons? No, he was carrying Islam in his heart.
Make dua ya Mawlana that every one of them inshallah will be, each one of them will be a reason to change an entire nation inshallah, like this sailor bi-iznillah.